Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. It looks like that Senator John McCain of Arizona will be the Republican nominee for president this year. The Democrats are still fighting it out. Meanwhile, we have some hot races in Kentucky to run. A United States Senator, members of Congress, members of the legislature. With me today to talk about all things political are the college's two resident political gurus, political science professor Gerald Watkins and Cale Sullivan, a student. And by the way, if you want to know about the Scottish National Party, Cale's your man. He loves politics worldwide. Now, let's begin with a special election that has come and gone over in the 6th House District. State Representative J.R. Gray, many years, he has resigned to accept the position of Labor Commissioner, will become Labor Secretary in the spring. The race was won by a former student of mine and Gerald's, Will Coursey, over the Republican Marvin Wilson. Any thoughts on that race to start with?
Well, Will had a pretty decisive win, 63-37. It'll certainly damage Marvin Wilson in the general election. Also, another thing that'll damage Marvin Wilson is that J.R. Gray is no longer the incumbent state representative, and Will is able to, as far as fundraising totals go, amass a small fortune, I'd say, just because of the fact that J.R. Gray was Labor's go-to guy in Frankfort, and now with him gone, businesses and other aligned interests won't feel the need to go out and try to stop J.R. Gray.
Well, Barry, you and I knew when Will Coursey was here that he was going to go far, and this is just the beginning from the people who
He's 29 years old.
29 years old, and probably he and I guess Stephen Rudy are probably tied for the youngest House members out of the 100-member chamber, and from the people that have watched him grow up from day one have said that he's wanted to be governor of Kentucky since about the time he was in kindergarten. And he's always been the consummate politician his entire life through school, and he has a thirst for knowledge. He's the nicest guy. He's an already accomplished orator, I think. He's one of the best speakers around here. He's got an engaging personality. He's intelligent. He's a genuinely good person, has a good heart, and he has a lot of experience. He has worked from the county level up, learning politics under Mike Miller in Marshall County, and he's the longest serving judge executive in the state, and now and then he served as a aide to House Speaker Jody Richards for years. He knows everyone in the state of Kentucky. I was impressed with his campaign. Not only did he get local endorsements, which I'm always proud of, he got statewide endorsements for all these different organizations that are vital to the electoral process, and he raises and spends $40,000. He's 29 years old, his first race ever, and wins by a 2-to-1 margin. If there's a rising star in Kentucky politics, now Cal will be in a few years.
Right.
He's got to get his education first, and we'll brag then that he's everything we made him,
right.
Like we can with Will right now. But if there's a rising star in the Kentucky Democratic Party or in Kentucky politics, younger, it's Will Coursey. Keep an eye on him. He's from Marshall County.
From Elva.
Yeah.
Or Elvie, as they say over there.
How many people live in Elvie? But he is going to go far. He's always wanted to be governor of Kentucky. I'm not a betting person, but if I were, I'd put my money on the fact that he will be. He's going to go far, and I think he's going to be an accomplished, mature legislator well beyond his years, and he's going to do a great job for Western Kentucky and for this entire Commonwealth. So I say keep your eyes on Will Coursey. He's going somewhere.
I think even the Republicans would concede his campaign commercials were amazing.
Yeah.
He's 29 years old. I mean, these were smooth. They were very well done. And as Gerald points out, the governor is on his team. The speaker, they did commercials for him.
Yeah.
The Kentucky Democratic Party chair, Jennifer Moore, came down. He really brought in the heavyweights and
Friends in high places.
Absolutely. And this, of course, was the third consecutive defeat for Marvin Wilson. Each time he has run, I believe he has lost by a wider margin. But now they're actually matched up again, are they not, in November, because this is for a special election.
Yeah, it'll be their Marvin Wilson's fourth attempt at that seat, and the way things are looking right now, I don't have any reason to believe he'd be any more successful than he has been the previous 3 times.
Have you heard anything from his camp? I mean, is this guy going to soldier on? Is he really going to seriously campaign for this seat now that he's lost 3 times in a row? I mean, what are your feelings?
Well, he didn't in the special election. I don't know if he didn't. Well, he spent like $10,000, so we obviously didn't have a lot of money. Will outraised him 4-1.
And that's unusual for a Democrat.
It is. It's usually just the opposite, and so you can see where the other people were betting. So I don't know if he took Will too lightly or just was there just to have a name on the ballot as an opponent. Which he would mean he just volunteered to be the sacrificial lamb, but who would want to do that and spend your money? But he didn't spend much time campaigning from what I was told, so I don't know if he's planning on picking it up by November. I think if Will Coursey were my opponent, I'd probably just bow out of the race and endorse him. But so, I don't know that he did work hard against J.R. Gray. In that those races, but he didn't against Will. So I don't not hardly anyone understood that strategy.
In many races in Western Kentucky, they're going to be uncontested. We can run the list. If you're Callaway County, Melvin Henley, no opposition, a Republican who became a Democrat. Graves County, Fred Nestler, Democrat, no opposition. Mike Cherry from Princeton, Democrat, no opposition. Frank Rash, Paducah, Democrat, no opposition. We do have a very hot, I believe will be very hot, race for the Democratic primary state Senate 1st District between Carol Hubbard and Rick Johnson. Any feel on that race?
I think that's going to be a fairly close race. Carol Hubbard, he was served in that state Senate seat for 7 years, same district. When he was actually 29 when he got elected, but was 30, the minimum age. He turned 30 by the time he was sworn in. And then served as a congressman for 18 years. So he has the name recognition. He raised $100,000 2 years ago in the race over here. So he ought to be able to raise a considerable sum. I think he has close to $40,000 so far. He's been running for a while. He's a tireless campaigner. He's 70 years old, but it's hard to outwork Carol Hubbard. And he does have some loyalties built up from when he was in Congress of constituents that he helped. That's what got him reelected each 2 years in the House. So he's going to be a formidable opponent. On the other hand, Rick Johnson served on the Kentucky Appellate Court for, 15 years?
16.
16 years, and he's won several elections, and he has excellent name recognition. He's has a good heart, a hard worker, and will be also an equally tireless campaigner. So I don't know. I guess it'll probably be for the Democrats to decide who can win in November against Ken Winters, who will be the stronger candidate. So, but Carol Hubbard, of course, has some negatives going into it. So I guess if I were going to give one an edge, I'd probably give a little edge to Rick Johnson at this point. But I think it'll be a pretty competitive race.
I concur. I believe Rick will probably win that race. Probably with 55%. I don't really see Carol Hubbard going below 40% in that primary. However, Carol Hubbard is a very difficult politician to have to campaign against. For one thing, he will leave no cards on the table. He will go, and if it takes spending every single dime of that $40,000, he will spend it and leave nothing for a general election. Now and his past is going to hurt him too, as we're all aware of.
That's what I was going to bring up. When you say negatives, we know what that is. We're talking indictment, conviction, and time
2.5 years in Fort Worth
for felony. Now, let's say, for example, how will that play in the election? That's a tough call. I mean, on the one hand, Hubbard, he comes out of when he decides to get back in the hustings, he apologizes for this. Says, I did it. I'm sorry. And I know the good book says we're supposed to forgive, but do voters always forgive?
After he was released from prison, he made the church circuit, and I think it was with a sincere heart, and he did apologize, and I've been forgiven. My God's forgiven me. I hope you will forgive me the people of this area, and he's very active in the community. He's active in the Downtown Lions Club, and he does a lot of good in the community, and a lot of people feel like you should forgive. I think his biggest core supporters are the elderly. A lot of people who feel like, I can forgive him, and that he's done stuff far in the past. They are pretty loyal supporters of Carol Hubbard. The group he has trouble with are younger, particularly males, who just can't vote for a convicted felon. And they see that as a flaw that, sure, I can forgive him, but I don't think I can vote for him when I have another choice out there. And so that's what I heard from a lot of people.
And you also mentioned going around the churches. We all heard cynics at that point say, what's this guy going to run for now? And that's also part of the equation out there. Go ahead, Cale.
Well, and also another thing that has to be analyzed is this is a Democratic primary. This is not the general election. Democrats in that district are going to want to put the candidate out there who they believe who has the best chance of defeating Senator Ken Winters. Another problem that he's got is he's perceived as a carpetbagger. In 2006, he ran for the second Senate district seat held by Bob Leeper and lost very close race, 58 votes. And now he's went and moved to Mayfield, where he's originally from, in order to try to get the first Senate seat. And I don't know how voters in Graves, Callaway, Hickman, Carlisle, Fulton, Trigg, I don't know how voters in those counties are going to perceive that.
That's an interesting point. And I think there's something else too, and I've heard this said from a number of people, just about any other Democrat would have beaten Bob Leeper. Do you agree with that?
Probably so. It was a Democratic year. The issues were on the Democratic side, as was 07, and I think 08, the issues are on the Democratic side, top to bottom again. So probably another Democrat would have won that race.
Let's say Larry Sanderson hopped into it. What do you think his chances would have been?
I think he would have won. He almost won the time before, but he had the negatives of the governor at that time of his party to also as a part of his opposition or the difficulty, not opposition, but it just made it difficult for him during that year. So if Paul Patton had his scandal, that Larry would have won then, I think, and 4 years later, I definitely think he would have won.
And also it hurts the Democratic message too. In 2006, Democrats nationally and here locally campaigned against the Republican culture of corruption. And here it is, the Democratic Party running a convicted felon as their nominee for senator. Most people take it as sleazy and hypocritical.
When you mentioned the word carpetbagger, it reminded me of when Carol Hubbard was challenged by Lacey Smith, who had moved down here from Louisville, and I'll never forget one of the TV spots that Carol Hubbard ran was a new sleek Silver Cloud Rolls Royce with a U-Haul behind it.
I remember that.
And he called him a carpetbagger.
He was living in Florida, wasn't he?
We had been in Louisville. He moved to Florida and then come back up here. Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
When he served in the state senate, he represented Louisville. But he had lived in South Florida. He had a home in West Palm Beach.
Yeah. Now, obviously, the Corsi win is a big plus for the Democrats. They were determined to hold on to that seat, and they did. Having said that, not everything was wonderful on February the 5th. The governor put quite a bit of his prestige and his political capital on the line in a Senate race over in eastern Kentucky that went the other way. So what happened there?
Well, controversial nominating process. The Democrats weren't anything close to being united. There were two contenders for a Democratic nomination for senator to replace Daniel Monjardo, who became lieutenant governor on December the 11th. The first one was, they're both ex-state representatives. One was named Roger Noe. He's usually been on the left on some important environmental issues. For one thing, he has written nasty editorials against Peabody Coal Company for their proposals to use mountaintop removal mining to extract a couple of veins of coal from Black Mountain, which is the tallest mountain in the state, and would completely take off the peak of that mountain. And the other candidate was Scott Alexander, who is also an ex-state representative, and the GOP nominee was Brandon Smith. The Democrats went and picked Scott Alexander despite the fact that he went and lost to Brandon Smith 3 times previously for Brandon Smith's state house district. and most of the Roger No supporters went and stayed home. They went in the executive committees in Bell, Harlan, Perry, and I can't think of the other
Leslie,
county.
wasn't it?
Leslie, yes. They went and got together to nominate their candidate as provided for in the Kentucky Democrat Party bylaws. The convention was split 2-2, and there was some controversy there because the tie was broken by a man who later took a $50,000 a year job with the Beshear administration.
So, and again, you know, politically, when you're the governor and you put your prestige on the line, if you win, that's all well and good. But if you don't, that's a risky business.
Yeah, and Governor Beshear is supposedly on his honeymoon right now, too, where he has more political capital than he'll probably ever have during his entire next 4 years. And to risk that prestige and then to lose is a little bit embarrassing. And so I would be, well, I'd be a little bit embarrassed or a little bit hesitant probably to get out there the next time. And so, you know, that may be have a negative effect on future races for Democrats who need you know, something to hang on to or need some of that extra help to get over the top. So that wasn't a good sign. He can recover from it, but he did come down and endorse Will Corsi, and he won 2-1. So
it's true.
I don't think he's lost clout or political capital, but it didn't help him any.
And one could say that Scott Alexander was the Democrats' version of Marvin Wilson. But still, and of course, this was a very close race, too.
It was.
Scott Alexander lost by 401 votes, and there were over 20,000 cast. Also, there were several allegations of voter fraud that were brought in and are now being investigated by Attorney General Jack Conway's office. And this is still it's a 2-1 Democratic district, and still to even lose, you know, it's kind of like in the same way that the loss in the 1st Senate district in 2004 demoralized local Democrats.
Another issue that's going to be out there, at least for right now, is the gambling issue. From what I'm hearing and talking to people who are around the legislature, the governor may not have enough votes for this to even get through the House. Are you all hearing the same thing?
Yes, I am too, and I would say that's probably pretty accurate. The gambling interests in Kentucky for the last, I guess, 8 years have been trying to get a bill through the House and Senate, a referendum, which would then go on the ballot, assuming it passes the House and Senate, for an up or down vote by the people to amend the Kentucky Constitution, which we'd have to do to allow expanded gaming in the state. And in years past, they have never been able to even find one single sponsor in the House or the Senate to even introduce the legislation. Kentucky's a rather conservative state and this is the Bible Belt, no doubt about it, and a lot of people are opposed to that. The House Speaker personally is opposed. The Senate President's personally opposed. But I thought since it was part of the governor's platform and he won such a landslide, although I don't think that was the reason for the landslide, that just happened to be a part of his platform, he was going to win the landslide anyway, whether he mentioned casino gambling or not. And but since he won big and he's he's on his honeymoon, I figure the Speaker and the President will let it go through, and then we'll have an up or down vote by the people, because the surveys, I think the last one that was conducted, we probably mentioned before, was 42% in favor, 48% opposed, but 82% said, well, I'd like to vote on it. And Governor Beshear said, well, if it does make it to the ballot, that there will be a local referendum attached to it, so the people within the communities, selected communities, maybe 11 or 12, they would have to approve it also to make it a little more acceptable. But even with that, as time goes by and people hear from their constituents, I don't think the support in the state has grown that much over the years, so I wouldn't be a bit surprised if it doesn't get through the House or Senate.
Well, you know, he alluded to the polling, 48-46, I believe, margin for approval. To a politician, that's a lose-lose issue.
Yeah, it is. It's almost 50-50.
You'd rather just, take the safe option and back out. The House, I wouldn't be worried about gambling, the gambling bill not getting through the House. Speaker Richards and Governor Beshear had what us Baptists would call a come to Jesus meeting, and the Speaker is committed to getting this thing through. However, I've taken a look at the Senate whip counts. The Senate, it just with the loss of this 30th Senate district, Republicans. There's 22 Republicans now, plus the independent Senator Bob Leeper from Paducah, who caucuses with the GOP. That makes 23, and that's how many votes it takes to get an amendment through the Senate. And the count I saw, it saw it about a couple months ago, 14 in favor, 14 dead set against, and in order to be able to get past, the pro-gambling lobby would have to get 9 out of 10. And now there's news about some senators from over in eastern Kentucky who are defecting and saying that they would vote against any gambling initiative now, without at least some major concessions from the governor and his allies.
Yeah, there was, I think, yesterday in Frankfurt, there is African American Baptist convention of some sort. A number of pastors had a meeting in Frankfurt to voice opposition to the casino gambling. So as the groups become more vocal and unified in opposition to it, and the politicians count the votes, as Cale said, I don't know. I don't see it even making it to the ballot, really.
Well, going back to your comment about Governor Beshear's landslide, which was certainly impressive, would it be safe to suggest, or correct to suggest, that perhaps that was fueled more by anti-Fletcher votes than pro-Beshear votes, just as 2003, when Fletcher won, that was more repudiation of Governor Patton?
I think you're right, and that's not, neither one of us want to take anything away from Governor Steve Beshear. He's a class act, he's intelligent, he's very eloquent, and he's experienced, and he ran a classy campaign. But really, any of those Democrats, and I think there was, 7 or 8 of them that got out there originally, they were all quality candidates, and probably any one of them would have won, except for the junkyard dealer in Eastern.
And Gatewood.
And Gatewood, yeah, the pro-marijuana smoker, he wouldn't have, those two wouldn't have won. Any of the rest of them, I think, probably would have won that election. But people were tired of the scandals and the pardons and all the things, the ineptitude and incompetence, and they were ready for a change. And so, just as you had mentioned, they were tired of the Patton administration's problems, and so I think that was a repudiation of Governor Fletcher and what had gone on in his administration. But Steve Beshear, and he had a good running mate, and Mongiardo. They did run a strong campaign and put those two forces together, and I mean, that's the biggest landslide in Kentucky governor election in a long time.
But how many folks do you all think voted for Beshear because of gambling?
Very, very few. Maybe, I'm not even going to try to put a number on it.
I agree with Cale. I don't think, to me it was a non-issue. I mean, it was out there, and people have their strong personal feelings about it, but as far as electing a new governor, I don't think that really had anything to do with the election.
Now, there might be some voters who went and enhanced their support for Steve Beshear, but very few of them went and said that, okay, I'm perfectly fine with the Fletcher indictments, I'm perfectly fine with the pardons and the cronyism, but went and said, you know what, Steve Beshear, I really like that guy. He's for gambling. I'm for gambling. Nobody went and said that.
I didn't hear that on the campaign trail either.
Yeah.
In the time we have left, let's take a look at some other races. The United States Senate, Mitch McConnell, incumbent, very tough man to beat, very well financed. 8 Democrats have lined up to go against him. Realistically, there are only 3 that would have a chance. Bruce Lunsford, Andrew Horn, and Mr. Fisher. What about that race? Who's going to win the Democratic primary?
I give the edge to Lunsford right now. He's got the money. He's shown he's willing to spend it, and he still has some statewide name recognition and goodwill from his previous failed bids for governor in 2003 and 2007. As far as those other 5 goes, David Williams, the man who ran for Agriculture Commissioner, who was a Democratic nominee for Agriculture Commissioner,
who was a Republican at one time.
Right. Yeah. He's going to be running. David Wiley, a man from E-Town, I believe. He's going to be running to raise attention to deaf issues. Michael Casaro, a physician from Prospect, is a suburb of Louisville. There's a man, I believe his name is James Rice. He's running as a deficit hawk, and there's one other who I can't even think of. But Andrew Horn, he's a Iraq veteran. He was a Marine Lieutenant Colonel. Now has a law practice in Louisville. He ran unsuccessfully for Congress in 2006 for the 3rd
John
District.
Yarmouth,
That lost to John Yarmouth in the primary.
But
and John
still an
Yarmouth
impressive
won.
candidate.
Right.
About 8 Democrats jumping in, you would think they had a weak opponent. And
See, that's what I was going to bring. Normally, as we know, when blood is in the water, or people think it is, they all jump in there.
And McConnell has a primary challenger too, a man by the name of Daniel Essick.
That he does. What are the odds of McConnell emerging victorious?
Well, if gambling ever gets legalized, I'll gladly take people's money.
Yeah.
Mitch McConnell is the Republican Party leader, minority leader of the U.S. Senate. He's probably the 3rd most powerful member of the U.S. Senate, and he's a masterful campaigner. He's already raised, I think, over $12 million, and he apparently has Alvin Barkley's endorsement, or he's using him in his commercials anyway. And but he's a heck of a campaigner, and he benefits the communities within the state, and has been able to bring money back to different areas of the Commonwealth, and try to protect USAC and keep it going here, bringing money in, $150 million a year for cleanup. So he's been there for what, 24 years.
So which of these 3 Democrats think has the best shot?
Well, I agree with Cal. Bruce Lunsford will probably be the Democratic Party nominee. There's going to be a lot of money spent. There's about 3 multimillionaires at least in that race that are able and apparently willing to spend some big bucks. So you're going to see a very expensive primary, I think. But Lunsford has the name recognition. He is an able campaigner, and as Cal said, he's built up some goodwill and some IOUs, particularly by bowing out and not challenging going forward for the primary nomination last time. So I think, and he finished 2nd behind Steve Beshear just a year ago. So I think Bruce Lunsford will be the Democratic Party nominee, and he'll be competitive. But Mitch, God Almighty, how do you beat him?
All right, we're now in the 22nd round. 20 seconds to left to get the rest of these races. House District over on the Mississippi River, incumbent Stephen Rudy versus challenger Democrat Mike Lawrence. You got 5 seconds to summarize that race.
Edged Mike Lawrence. Mike Lawrence has pledged to run a clean, issues-oriented, positive campaign, and that will greatly benefit the small D Democratic process and voters.
Stephen Rudy is going to be tough to beat. He's the incumbent. His family's highly respected, but Mike Lawrence has family over there, and he's been in public office 12 years, and he's going to work hard. Normally I'd call it a toss-up, but it's a Democratic district, so Mike probably will have the edge in a Democratic year.
10 seconds left. Ed Whitfield versus Heather Ryan.
Man, that's going to be close. I will give Ed about 90% to 10% of that one.
All right, 2 seconds left. Democratic Republican nominee for president.
John McCain, and his running mate is Mike Huckabee, and
I'll go with Hillary Clinton, and in order to unify the party, Barack Obama.
We're out of time. I'm Barry Craig. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.